Senator, I believe in equality. Equality for all Americans, men and women, also regardless of race, ethnicity. My mom was an example, as I described yesterday, of breaking barriers, showing me first on racial equality by her example of teaching at McKinley Tech. Then, when she became a lawyer in the late 70s, there were not many women prosecutors at the time, definitely male-dominated, and how she overcame barriers, was a great prosecutor, became a state trial judge in Maryland, appointed by Democratic governors. She showed me by her example the importance of women's equality. During college, you've received a letter from 10 college friends of mine who are women athletes at Yale. Talked about how I treated them in women's sports with respect and as equal, even when I was in college. You have a letter from 84 women I worked with in the Bush administration who talked about my efforts to work with them in the tense environment of the West Wing, especially after September 11th.
Did you say 84?
84 women signed a letter who had worked in the Bush White House, and worked in that tense environment. But I came to be a judge in 2006, May 2006. And August 2006, Linda Greenhouse of the New York Times runs a story in the New York Times about the scarcity of women law clerks at the Supreme Court that year. There were 7, I believe, that year out of 37. And she wrote a story about that. And that seemed to me very odd and unacceptable. And I started thinking about what I could do. First of all, why is that happening? And what can I do about it? What's the problem? What can I do? So the problem seemed to me these networks that judges rely on for clerk hiring, some professor networks, were excluding women, or at least women weren't fully represented in those. That's true with minorities as well, by the way. And so I made sure when I was talking to professors at law schools that I made sure I want to see a broad pool of well-qualified applicants, including women. And in that year, for example, fall of 2006, which was my first year on the bench, we hire a year ahead, so I'm hiring for 2007. And I hired 3 women for that clerk class, 2007, 3 out of the 4. Zena Bash, Britt Grant, and Porter Wilkinson. Zena's right here. And that was the start of my efforts to make sure that women were not being excluded. And I really worked on why is this happening. So Yale Law Women did a study about 5 years ago about participation in class, the differences on who gets called on in class. And there's slight differences there, men and women, who then get selected as research assistants, slight differences there, and it just keeps building till you get a disparity in the clerk network. And there's a pipeline problem, and I've said I'm breaking through that problem. I'm not listening to that. And so I've been very aggressive about hiring the best and understanding that the best include women. And as you say, Senator, a majority of my clerks have been women, 25. I believe 21 of them have gone on to clerk at the Supreme Court. And they're an awesome group. And if confirmed to the Supreme Court, I will continue to do this. What it takes, and I think my mom showed me this, President Bush showed me this a little, what it takes is just not accepting the same old answer. Oh, there's a disparity. Well, why? And then do something about it. And I tried to figure out why, and we can talk about minority clerks too, but on women, why were those disparities existing as described by Linda Greenhouse? And I tried to figure out why, and then I did something about it. I'm very proud of that because I do believe that all people should be treated equally, and the law clerk position, which may sound ministerial, and to some extent the job is helping the judge and shortly out of law school, but those positions are very important launching pads for the next generation of leaders. The people will be sitting in these seats The people will be sitting in my seat. Lots of them are going to come from law clerks. So if we're not being inclusive now, that will show up later. And so it's just been a critical part. It's something I'm very focused on at all times, is equality in the clerkship hiring process and making sure women are getting the same opportunities that men are. I appreciate the question, Senator.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the answer. And I think everybody in this country should appreciate the answer. And I think it distinguishes you.